Welcome to the Shower Epiphanies podcast, where we explore your hidden thoughts and desires, revealing your greatest drop the mic moments. Now, here's your host, Art Costello.
Welcome to the Shower Epiphanies podcast. Today, Jonathan Masiulionis is my guest, and I knew I'd screw up the name, but it's not in the name, it's in who this guy is, and he's a powerful publicity, powerful person. Just has a heart of gold. And for nearly 2 decades, Jonathan has been helping creatives, entrepreneurs, and entertainers across the country with their promotion. His ability to highlight the best of what artists bring to the table is uniquely exceptional. With the power of enthusiasm as a publicist for inspirational, spiritual, and children's authors at Empowered Publicity, Jonathan understands the whole genre. He uses his network-savvy, well-developed organization skills, heartfelt positive energy to promote, establish a true partnership and promotion. Jonathan empowers his clients with personal attention and dedicated support that they need. Jonathan currently resides in Buffalo, New York, but his heart is moving to San Diego. And later this year, he's going to open a hospice home for children, which, as anyone who knows me knows that children are my passion, training them, teaching them, loving them. And I can't imagine what it's going to be like for Jonathan working with kids in hospice, having lost my wife to cancer and knowing how that affected me. I can't imagine as a child. Anyway, welcome, Jonathan. It's a pleasure to have you here. Can you tell us your story and how this all started, this tremendous journey you're on?
Art, I want to say, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you for the opportunity to be on your program, and thank you for the gift of you. Normally, anytime that I'm blessed with any sort of an opportunity such as this, I'll kind of save this towards the end, but I feel that I'm starting to learn, and I should say remember more that, life isn't necessarily about me. I'm just a cog in the wheel. I'm an important cog, but I'm not the cog. And it's important for me to express my gratitude and appreciation to everyone who extends opportunities along the way and opens up their heart to me. So for you and for the wonderful work that you're doing in service to children and to growing children, so to speak, all across the country and all around the world, I want to extend my appreciation and my gratitude and my thanks to you before we begin this lovely conversation today.
Well, I accept it. And we have a strong connection because we both have resided in the remote parts of upstate New York. So yeah. We have a lot in common. And what you probably didn't know about me is that I went to college in San Diego and lived quite a few years there. And one of my dreams is to own property overlooking the Pacific Ocean in La Jolla.
I wouldn't be surprised that at some point in some fashion, some way, shape, or form, in the foreseeable future, in the yonder off distance, that we'll be able to have this sort of interaction, not just, from afar, but in a more face-to-face sort of thing, which is fantastic. Thank you for sharing that too.
Yeah, we'll do it. So let's hear your journey, how it all started for Jonathan.
If you would have told me, Art, that, one of the big visions for myself, if you would have even told me, first of all, that children would be my life's purpose, if you would have told me that before, and I would have said, you're full of it. If you would have said that, a children's hospice would be one of the biggest visions and goals and realities of my life, I would have said, no way. There were many different things that I feel this go around I needed to learn and I needed to remember. This life for me in many instances was a do-over because I feel that, our soul gives us the opportunities to get things right at some point in time. We, many times we learn the lesson via pain and suffering, right? That was kind of like the same cycle over and over again. But I feel that, we get to a point where, as the famous boxer Roberto Duran said, no mas, no more. And you choose to be your authentic self. You choose to live in integrity. You choose to have everything that you do internally be reflected on the external. And that's really how life works. If you're loving yourself, which we're going to be talking extensively about today, when we take the time to do that, it reflects in what it is that we see in our relationships, in our personal relationships, in our business relationships, et cetera, and so forth. Growing up, I can admit, I felt very challenged with loving myself. Growing up, I wanted to be a sportscaster. I wanted to be the next Chris Berman on ESPN, right? We happened to be doing this interview on a Sunday when we're enjoying this conversation. So, grow up and I'm watching NFL primetime with Chris Berman. It's like, that's who I want to be, right? Back in 1989, I began a 25-plus year love affair with the world of professional wrestling and sports and entertainment. Vince McMahon's WWE. Wrestling provided a cathartic effect for me. So no matter what was going on in my earthly surroundings, so to speak, I had that as my go-to. I give a lot of credit to my parents and to my sister because they did the absolute best that they can. There was a large part of time where it was a very toxic relationship in terms of surroundings and things of that nature. That's because, we were living on top of each other and, we weren't able to focus on our own selves and nurture ourselves. It was just this survival sort of mentality. But I look at that, Art, from a different perspective now because everyone is doing the best that they can with the knowledge they have, the skills they have, the tools they have, and the love that they have. Right? Everyone is just doing the best that they can. And many of us, I feel, and we're really being given a golden opportunity to let this go if we haven't, any sort of resentment, any sort of anger from people towards the past, it just doesn't serve you in terms of the present and moving forth. So I followed my passion, went through high school, went through college, began doing an internship at the Empire Sports Network, which was, had a relationship with the Buffalo Sabres, John Regas, who owned Adelphia Cable, which was then one of the largest cable companies in the country. It turns out he was embezzling money from the company. He went to prison. So I share this because the Empire Sports Network went under. So I went in from being a production assistant to, getting my foot in the door to really not knowing what I was going to do. Now, growing up, Art, if I may mention, I was born and raised Catholic. Altar server, Eucharistic minister, CYO, you name it, I did it. There was a very strong relationship with God that I have that I still have to this particular point in time. I still remember the Our Father in Latin that I learned in 7th grade. But, a lot of Catholicism, not to get too preachy or off the rocker here, at least for me, it seemed like forced. It was, you must do this, bless me, Father, for I have sinned, et cetera, et cetera. So around, 2002 or so is really when I started losing my way, especially. I began working in the world of collections at that particular point in time for what lasted nearly 13 years. I can look back in hindsight and say that, collections taught me so much about life, about the work that I do as a publicist, the importance of listening to people, to open up your heart. And, one of the things that I had to move through, and I hope that your listeners can really resonate with, is that many of us, we came from the perspective of what's in it for me before how may I serve. As long as I get what's mine, then maybe I can give a little bit here and there. But it wasn't this vast open heart, right? I began doing what was, at that particular point, a wrestling radio show on the college station that I was actually at here in the Buffalo area, Buffalo State College. Had such a fun time doing that show for over 2 years. It transformed into what was one of the first ever podcasts that was created in 2004. The show was called Monday Night Mayhem. The show lasted for over a decade. It was one of the most popular wrestling radio shows in the country. So I found myself interviewing every single top professional wrestler, including guys that are at the top of the charts now. Your AJ Styles, your Kevin Owens, even like your Stone Cold Steve Austins, Hulk Hogan's, right? Traveled across the country, 5 WrestleManias. I was broken. I felt broken, I should say, on the inside. My on-air personality that I had created was the Big Mosh. I morphed into that because people felt that they could love the Big Mosh because the Big Mosh could do stuff for people. The Big Mosh could make things happen for people, right? But slowly but surely, I did not know who I was. I didn't know who Jonathan was. And I've adopted my spirit name of Jonathan. John is my legal given birth name. And I never, it's not to say that I didn't resonate with that, but, Jonathan, it was shown to me over time, means either gift from God or giver from God. And it was just a continued part of my growth. Things began to shift for me a little bit, Art. Things began to shift for me. Today we're talking about the importance of loving ourselves just the way that we are. And it took me more than a minute to be able to realize it. There were a few experiences else that I needed to move through. My grandmother passed away in 2013, August 13th, 2013. I'm Polish. Of course, we call them babcia, right? Polish for grandmother. And I had a very strong relationship with her growing up as a child. And on the surface, when that happened, it may have looked like one of the most traumatic experiences of my entire life. In hindsight, it turned out to be one of the most beautiful experiences of my life, because she very much became my guardian angel from the other side and has very much guided me over the course of, nearly now the past 7 years. I began, as the expression goes, when we have an awakening, we start going down the same streets, but looking at them from a different perspective. So several months after she passed, I let go of Monday Night Mayhem back into the universe. I did a health, wellness, and spiritually aligned radio show and inspirationally based podcast called So Luminous Radio. So while there was this time of grief that was happening, people such as Anita Moorjani, Jack Canfield, Wayne Dyer's family, Mira Kelly, top transformational leaders, best-selling authors were coming into my life, and I had no idea why this was happening. It was like these really cool beams of light coming into my life. Anita Moorjani's book was actually given to me by what was my first spiritual teacher. Her name is Jennifer Norton, and it was a book called Dying to Be Me. And Anita believed that fear had caused her cancer. For all of your listeners who are not familiar with Anita's journey, I'll do my part to give a condensed Reader's Digest nutshell version. Anita had her father and I believe her sister, or her father and her best friend, I believe, passed away from cancer. So she did everything to prevent herself from getting cancer. She ate from glass, she did the supplements, she ate organic, et cetera, et cetera. So what happens? She gets cancer. She whittles herself down to under 90 pounds, has tumors the size of grapefruits in her body, and she lands up dying. She flatlined. She had a near-death experience. She came back while she was in the NDE. She believes that she had a choice to come back or to transition. I believe she saw her father and her best friend in the dream, and it really was her choice. She came back. Within 6 weeks of coming out of the NDE, there was no trace of cancer in her body.
Wow.
So I was wondering why, Anita's journey in certain respects was pretty darn similar to my own. In terms of the whole fear, there were different storylines that I told myself. One was, there's something wrong with me. So of course, when we replay the same story in our mind over and over again, it eventually in some way, shape, or form becomes our external reality, right? There was a lot of things about me. We were talking in the Shower Epiphanies green room just a short time ago. We were talking about, sometimes we have difficulties receiving. Sometimes we feel unworthy. Sometimes we feel unloved, right? How can we love ourselves, quote unquote, especially if we did something wrong? So shortly thereafter, this was, I believe, in 2014, I should say, after I left Collections while I was doing So Luminous Radio, I went over to the Hay House I Can Do It event. Hay House, of course, many of your listeners may be familiar with, one of the top inspirational spiritual consciousness publishing companies. They had an I Can Do It event at the Roy Thompson Hall. And that completely changed the trajectory of my life, because this is where for 2 days I was immersed in the energies of, Anita Moorjani and Dr. Joe Dispenza, Gabby Bernstein. But there was a transformation that was beginning to happen. It was also a very intense dark night of the soul that was happening at that particular point in time too. But I remember coming back on the QEW, driving back to Buffalo from Toronto, and I said, I want to help people, I want to inspire people, and I want to serve people, but I don't know how. And that's when Empowered by John, which was the name of my company at first, was created. So I was starting to get a little bit of a better idea of things, but the mind was still focused on acquisitions. It was focused on, what's in it for me before how may I serve. I let go of working in collections in 2014. In 2015, I remember I was actually seeing Anita Moorjani for the second time. It was a self-love workshop in London, Ontario. And I remember coming back from that workshop and I felt very flushed. There were some symptomologies that I was moving through. I remember going to the urologist's office, and he had pointed to what was, I don't know if it was left or right testicle, and he said, this should not be enlarged like this. So, they did scans and everything, and it was shown. And I use the term perceived when I'm saying what I'm about to say, because I believe that everything in life, if there's a perceived illness, sickness, or disease that we're presented, we have the opportunities to move through and heal. And the only thing that's technically permanent, so to speak, is what we decide to posse out from, when we transition to the other side. So I had a doctor tell me, Jonathan, you have testicular cancer. And that is when, it could have looked like I really had an opportunity. I had a golden opportunity. It was really the universe's way of saying, you can finally love yourself, right? So there was a part of me that had an idea of what was happening. on a bigger picture perspective. And then there's the part of me that's on the earthly surface that like could have continued this storyline in an extensive fashion moving forth. So I remember, Art, actually having chemotherapy for a couple of months. And I remember there were people that were getting chemotherapy, you know, being an empath, I'm able to kind of pick up on things. And I was picking up on things from other people that I knew that they may not last very long. So I was to make the most of that experience that was actually there, right? But this is when I began to really take my life back, to take my power back, to really learn to love myself. A funny story, you know, you have to try to find humor in these sorts of experiences, right? You know, the urologist had mentioned, you know, we would like to donate part of your sperm to the Buffalo Sperm Bank because you said you see yourself, you know, having a child at some point, right? And I told him, I said, I've clearly seen myself having a son at some point in time. With all due respect, I don't necessarily need to have the Buffalo Sperm Bank on board, right? That I see myself fathering my own child, you know. So I made the decision at that point. I could have continued to kind of, you know, I could have had an additional surgery. I did have one surgery, but I could have perpetuated one of the stories that I kept telling myself of there's something wrong with me, illness, sickness, disease, believe in all of that. I still had to go through a little bit more than that in some way, shape, or form. There was, you know, it could have looked like I lost everything. Like I had, you know, no money to my name, lost all my money, had an eviction notice in my hand. This was in, you know, 2016, I believe. So I share these sorts of things because if there's your listeners that are tuning in right now and they're feeling challenged when it comes to loving themselves, it's important for them to be able to look at everything in your life as a blessing. Now, sometimes it may take some time to get to that particular point. I could have easily looked back and say, why did the collections chapter happen? You know, why was this perceived diagnosis given? You know, why did I lose all my money at that particular point? I could have easily beaten myself up, and I did to a certain point. But things began to open up even further. I would probably say, you know, about 2 years ago when I was really starting to make more of the right decisions. I really took the time to get into, you know, I hired a coach on Mind of Things, who I'm still blessed to work with, Heather Christian Strang out on the Oregon coast, began doing body talk sessions with her. It took some time, Art. You know, I feel that, you know, what that I've shared from this, you know, sometimes people have to go through these sorts of experiences to have a deeper appreciation just of everything, of life.
The need to have closure in any given situation is sheer human nature. And when it comes to romantic relationships, this desire skyrockets. Has your previously failed relationship left you in immense pain? It's not uncommon for people to shy away from a new relationship after their first one fails miserably. The fear of the unknown makes them hide in a shell to prevent any future heartbreak. Relatable? Despite wanting to love and be loved, you can't take the plunge if your mind and heart are still locked somewhere in the past. Maybe you aren't aware of the power of releasing the past, or perhaps you don't know how to do it. Art Costello in his online course teaches the art of moving on from bad places to happier, more stable ones. This course can change your life for good, helping you beat all kinds of negativity on the road to eternal bliss. Sign up now before the gloominess gets the better of you at expectationacademy.com.
One of the things that I was going to bring up to you that I have learned through my life's experience is that big events lead to choices, and how we choose either in the negative or the positive makes all the difference. Because when we're in the positive, we get positive results. And of course, negative brings the illness, the sickness, the bad thoughts, all of that to the surface.
Correct.
So Henry Ford said, we are who we think we are. You're right. If you think, no matter how you think. So there's so much truth in that because we are who we think we are. So it's important.
It is. And it's interesting because to kind of be a bookend to what is it you just shared, what actually comes to mind is that, you know, many of us, we think that we are our bank accounts. We think we are the titles that we have, property owner, husband, wife, CEO, president, blah, blah, blah. So this is, you know, even one of the reasons why I don't struggle with this at all, but I'm not the typical publicist. I even am a little uncomfortable being referred to as a publicist. I feel that God has blessed me with tremendous gifts of being of service to other people, and it just happens to look like what a publicist actually does. But I feel that it's important to be able to really be in the right mindset to really lead your life as if you don't necessarily own anything. Wayne Dyer, before he passed, he was very adamant in saying, the last suit that I'll ever own is no pockets, because where I'm going, I can't take anything with me. So, right, one of the things, we'll probably unpack even further, talking about, loving yourself just the way that you are, is acknowledging that you are enough right now. And it's something that you need to tell yourself every day, because how many times do we find ourselves telling this to other people? Mr. Rogers, we'll talk about him, I'm sure. He says, you're perfect, you're whole, you're healthy, you're complete just the way that you are. I like you just the way that you are. Sometimes we can say that to other people, but we have the difficulties of doing that ourselves. And this is part of our work. This is part of why we didn't just come here to pay taxes and die. And I feel that many people are starting to kind of get out of that old mindset of just, living in restriction, living in limitation, and really believing, if I may, pardon something from take something from politely from one of Disney's most popular movies of all time, Aladdin, it really is like we're stepping into a whole new world where we really believe that we can love ourselves and we don't have to feel guilty about it.
A lot of it lies in our expectations, because when we live to the expectations of other people, and I've been on this kick the last 3 podcasts that I've done, when we live to the expectations of others, we're never happy because we're not living to our expectations. The seed that God planted in us, to where our greatness lies, is in how we expect. It has such a huge influence on the path of our lives. And when we have these big events and we have these things that awaken us and we learn to really deep, and I need to be very cautious because I don't want people to think that this is about being selfish. We have expectations for ourselves, and God has expectations for each and every one of us. And those expectations are not about being selfish. They're about finding your path, your passion for this world, what you've been sent here to do, and what you've been created for lies so much in our expectations. But when we get influenced by the social expectations, the relationship expectations, the advertising expectations, the government expectations, and religious expectations, they start to really alter who we are. And it's important that you really focus on what you truly know is your passion and what your expectations are for yourself. And when you focus on the goodness of it, good things happen.
It's interesting that you actually share that, because I feel that we're in a time right now where many good things are starting to happen. Taking a quote from Heather Christian, who I mentioned beforehand, that she says, things are just getting better and better now. And I totally believe that. To add briefly what you mentioned about expectations, it's vital for us. Yes, God has expectations of ourselves, very simple. Love yourself, love your neighbor, be kind. It's just super simple, right? We don't necessarily need a tablet with 10 specific commandments on there, right? They're very even simpler than that kind of thing, right? But the importance of, when I say the word expectation, I also think of the word attachment, right? When you have an expectation, like it's going to happen this way, right? We always like to think we've got this great plan. Here's how it's going to happen. Like, we're talking about this move to San Diego, in what'll be a few months from now, right? I'm going to move to this part. I'm going to move, live here. And, this person's going to be here. And, and you're just basically doing what I call the Marcel Marceau. You're trying to just go like this, right? And I feel that when you are in a state of allowance, there are experiences that are trying to come into your life. There are people that are trying to come into your life. There are relationships that are trying to come into your life. But if you're like this, if you have this like big X in front of you, the universe cannot move its way through to you. God cannot move God's way through you. Some people say that God is a he or a her. I happen to believe that God is a he, but it's, God is this beautiful being, besides the point. But if we have this state of restriction, the state of limitation, things may take a little longer to actually happen. So this is why your listeners may be saying, well, why is all of this important? What does this have to do with the price of tea in China? The core of everything, the core of all of our relationships, our businesses, whatever we do in life is rooted and based on how we feel about ourselves. And when you take the time to be with that and to nurture that And to not give up on that, to not give up on you, your life can become like Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood in some way, shape, or form.
Yes, it can.
Has anyone ever inspired you to discover a happier, healthier, and more fulfilled you? It is a magical experience, isn't it? Inspiration is indeed very powerful, yet it's often undermined. It can lift you from the ground to the sky in no time. Have you ever thought about returning the favor by inspiring the people around you? If you don't think you have it in you, we have good news for you. Art Costello's online course has everything you need to learn to supercharge yourself and shape your character into a powerful personality. Get ready to discover your strengths and unleash the creativity within. Don't believe it? Check it out yourself by signing up for this life-changing course at expectationacademy.com. That's expectationacademy.com.
One of the things about it is that I talk about a lot, and I've written about a lot about my belief has always been that I believe in the possibility of everything. Because when you believe in the possibility of everything, you don't let anything get by you. Everything becomes a learning experience. And when you take every event in your life, no matter if it's tragic or whether it's the most joyous thing, if you'll garner from it all the lessons and all the learning experiences that come out of that, you can never look at anything as a failure because you gain the experience and knowledge that is meant to teach us. And that's how we grow as human beings. You know, I'm 72. It's taken me all these years of just living this circle of life to come to some of these realizations. And I want people to understand you don't have to wait that long. If you'll open up yourself to the possibilities that exist for everything in your life and just follow the path, God's plan for us will unfold like a beautiful flower. And He'll get us through the hard times. I never planned on my wife passing away at 60, or she was 56, 55, and I was 63. I never planned on that happening. You know, that wasn't my plan. My plan was totally opposite. But it taught me so much, and it's led me on a path that has been incredibly beautiful since. I could have taken the view and let it stop me right there. At 63, I could have shut everything down in my life and just said, I quit. I'm not going to do anything.
Yes.
I did the complete opposite.
Right.
It propelled me to become bigger, better, and greater than I ever have been in my life, and ever beyond my dreams, you know.
If I may share a brief story, and thank you for opening up your heart and sharing the beautiful relationship that you have with your wife. One of the things that I encourage, not just children, and this is really the root of the children's hospice that I wish to open up and will be and am opening up. It's all happening all at once, right? But that love never dies, that it only changes form. We're so used to growing up, I remember the holidays were very big for me growing up. So, being Polish, we'd have the Polish meatless meal, we'd have the pierogies, and we'd have the fish and the bean and bacon soup and the cream and mushroom soup. And, there would be my grandmother, right? There'd be the other members of my family too. When someone passes away, we're so used to this. We think that we are, and since, Art and I are speaking both visually and with sound, so to speak, he can see me kind of patting my head. But what I'm sharing with your listeners is that, we're used to the visual. We're used to, putting our hands in the face of someone because we think in some way, shape, or form, this is all who we are. We're just the bodies, right? But I'll share with you and I'll share with your listeners something that'll really open up your heart. Growing up, I lived in a time when malls were big. Like, actual malls, not kind of like the malls we have right now, right? Or things that are called malls. But there was a bus. There was the 4-H bus that would travel from where my grandmother lived in the Sloan area and to the Thruway Mall. It was, a small bus ride. So after my grandmother transitioned, I saw a bus that said Thruway Mall. Now, it wasn't the 4-H, it was the 6A, I believe it was, or the 46A, I believe, something with the 6A in it. So I said, Babcha, if this is you, I want you to make your presence known. Art, I see that bus nearly every day. I see that bus on Sunday nights at 9 o'clock sometimes, realizing buses shouldn't run at 9 o'clock on a Sunday night. So it's just interesting. Like, I could just be moving through, a challenging day, and I see that bus, and I say, all right, Bob's just reminding me to stay focused, to stay confident, to love myself despite what it is that I may be going through. So it's interesting, we're talking today about loving yourself just the way that you are. And we're also remembering that love comes in different forms. It's not just loving yourself. It's not just loving other people. It's realizing and remembering that love takes a different shape and form when you're on the other side.
Yeah, there's a great book out by Randy Alcorn called Heaven. It's a very technical book, and I've mentioned it before on my show, but it's a biblical description of heaven, and it's not what you would think it is. It's very different. It's very different than what we actually think heaven looks like from a biblical perspective, and he's a biblical scholar, and it's not what we think it is. That's all I'm going to say about it.
I like to think that, again, putting smiles on the hearts and faces of your listeners. I like to think that heaven is like my two favorite stores of all time, Trader Joe's and Toys R Us. They're like Toys R Us, and I still refer to it as it's in the present tense because I can literally just go across the Queen Elizabeth Expressway, from Buffalo going into Canada, and literally like a half an hour, there's a Toys R Us. It's still open, right? And Toys R Us is kind of resurrecting back in a different form. But, I feel that heaven is, your loved ones will be there when you get there. The things that you enjoy doing, as a child, you'll be able to do when you're in heaven. So for me, I love listening to records. So I feel that, especially as we take the time to fully enjoy this experience, take the time to love ourselves, to nurture ourselves, to express that same joy for other people that are in our lives. We get to a point where, there's no longer a fear of what's to come. Because we know that love never dies. We know that it only changes form. We know that we just simply morph into something, some other form, so to speak. So I know for me, I still feel that I got a good long life ahead of me. I just turned, 38 this past August. But whenever my time comes, I'm not afraid. And this is when you're given that sort of a label, whether it be cancer, heart attack, whatever, you face your own mortality. You say, holy, what? Is this it? And if we continue to fester those sorts of thoughts and beliefs, we can kind of, speed up that experience a little bit, right? But I honestly feel that, and this is one of the things that I feel is a strong component about loving and nurturing yourself, loving yourself just the way that you are. You come to a point, if you allow yourself to believe this, where you can feel that you can fulfill your wishes. I have here in my office one of Wayne Dyer's best-selling books called Wishes Fulfilled. And he encourages everyone to believe that whatever your heart is desiring is already a present reality, even if it hasn't taken the full form and shape yet, to connect to the energy of that and then to allow the other sorts of things to unfold, still taking the necessary guided action steps, right? So again, when you take the time, you realize that love is that fuel. Some people might be listening saying, I have this desire to do this, or I have this wish to do that. I don't know how it's going to happen. One of the things that I had learned, thanks to my former co-host at the Soul Luminous radio show that I did, the health, wellness, spiritually aligned, inspirationally based podcast, Michelle Rober, she had told me, Jonathan, you don't need to know the how. You don't need to know the how. Right? When you plant your seeds, right? If you're a farmer and you're planting the cucumbers, the green peppers, the tomatoes, right? You don't question how the crop is going to look. You don't know if you're going to be having, maybe, the green peppers will be, a little green and yellow, right? You don't know what they're going to look like. But if you take the time, you water the crops, you nourish them, they come out more beautiful than you actually realize. So again, Art, we spend all of this time, many of us with this old mindset of chasing, forcing, pushing, feeling we had to make things happen. How many times do you hear that? Got to make things happen, right? No, you don't. No, you don't. And, every day I consistently remind myself of this, because when you're in this state of allowance, you don't need to make things happen. When you're loving yourself, there are things beyond words and description that can actually come into your life. Just several months ago, I was actually out in the San Diego area for a full week. And some of the experiences that I had, there's this area in La Jolla, which is where the Children's Hospice is going to be built. It's right where the La Jolla Cove meets the Pacific Ocean. It's called the Children's Pool Beach.
I know right where it's at.
Yep. And this is, like before, I was actually there back in 2005. That was the only other time that I was in San Diego beforehand. I took a picture of myself on that little pier, that little walkway. For those of your listeners who've never been to La Jolla, I'll actually just mention it's kind of like a little Leonardo DiCaprio Titanic catwalk, where at the very end you can put your arms stretched out. It's like you're in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. You can say, I'm the king of the world. I took that picture. My soul remembered that picture. At that point, it was an area that was just filled with baby seals and baby otters on the sand. When I went back there was children. Actually, Children's Pool Beach actually had children on it, right? And I said, man, it took me 14 years from when I was last in San Diego, which was end of March, early April 2005, all the way through 2019, August of 2019. And I said, it took me 14 years to get here. So there were many times along the path. If there's listeners of your program right now that are feeling like giving up, like throwing in the towel, they feel that loving themselves is a challenge. Sometimes we even tell ourselves that. Do not cheat yourself out on some of the greatest experiences of your entire life. I feel that my life partner is going to be coming into my life extremely soon. Her energy is already present. One of the main reasons why I came here this lifetime is to also be a great father. Now, he's not here, but I've been communicating with him from the other side for about the past 5 years or so. And this is no judgment meant towards other people. There's a lot of people that look for the love externally, and then they get into relationships, and sometimes they're extremely dysfunctional. They feel they need to bring in a child into the world, or bring in their boyfriend or their girlfriend, or whatever the case might be. And I'm so grateful and so appreciative that I've been given this opportunity. It's kind of like I've been telling my son, I said, I'm getting my you-know-what together. I'm getting my ducks in a row, right? So when you take the time, it's not to say that people need to be told why to love themselves. If you need a little reminder as to why that's important, the experiences of your life will be that much more nourishing, nurturing, energetic, engaging, lively, if you're in that headspace, you're in that mind space, and you're in that heart space all together, where everything is in alignment. I feel, Art, that as the result of loving yourself, you're in alignment mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, and that reflects in your external reality. Sometimes I still find myself challenged, right? Every time we level up, right? Especially if our purpose is very big, we may be faced with different sorts of challenges or, bring up of stuff from the past, but it's a matter of how you respond to that. And this is why I'm so glad that Mr. Rogers has come back into my life over the course of this past year plus, because I very much have needed a very gentle, nurturing, masculine role model to remind me of who I am and why I'm here to do what I'm doing, especially for the children.
Don't know which direction you want your life to take? Are you sinking deep down into the pit of uncertainties day by day? So, what's the secret to leading a happy, satisfied life? It's taking matters into your own hands. But what if the matters in question are a total blur? Art Costello's Expectation Academy course aims to tell you exactly how you can get some clarity in your life. This course can be your savior on your journey to reinventing yourself. While you certainly can't plan your whole future ahead, you can definitely control twists and turns your life takes. So what are you waiting for? Sign up for this course now at expectationacademy.com. Get a chance to broaden your horizons and add meaning to your life. That's expectationacademy.com.
I wanted to talk about Mr. Rogers and how it has affected you, because I know that it's had a pronounced effect on you and your thought process and your feeling process and just who Jonathan is.
Growing up, I think I was maybe more of a Sesame Street person than Mr. Rogers, but I remember watching Mr. Rogers. And it's really fascinating because, I think that your listeners might actually be a little bit cheated outside of this visual experience, but I actually am holding one of the replicas of the neighborhood trolley, which I actually have. I feel this is the best $60 investment in my entire life from shoppbs.com, right? But around 2000, I believe it was the spring of 2018, that's when the Mr. Rogers documentary, Won't You Be My Neighbor, came out. Mm-hmm. And that is really around the time when I first saw the film. It was one of the greatest films I've ever seen in my entire life. It really showed, Mr. Rogers, the soul. People are used to seeing Mr. Rogers in front of the camera. Well, he actually was that and then some in real life. Mm-hmm. He was an ordained Presbyterian minister. Many people may not realize that or remember that. On his show, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, it wasn't "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned." It was, you could call it the religion of Mr. Rogers. Robert Holden, the well-known Hay House author out in the UK, says, someone asks you, what is your religion? You say love. And I feel that Mr. Rogers reminded us of that. Every show, he started off and he ended the program by saying, I like you just the way you are.
You are.
It was this gentle embedding of this very important message. Sometimes we embed the other kinds of messages. We tell ourselves the other kinds of stories, right? And sometimes people can feel that Mr. Rogers is just meant for kids, right? He's teaching all these valuable lessons, which I totally feel is important, right? But me then as a 37-year-old man at the time, when I saw this film, why am I picking up on this? Why am I starting to resonate with this? And he had such a very important purpose for the children. There were many things during the course of my life where I kind of squashed down, like my feelings, my emotions, my purpose. And I remember a friend of mine, Lisa Jolly, who's a channeler out in Australia, had actually, Wayne Dyer was speaking through her, and he told me to begin reading a book called Memories from Heaven, which is one of Wayne Dyer's last books, where he actually talks to children about their experience in being heaven before they came into the real world, before they came here on earth. Shortly thereafter, this is around 2016, I was a part-time after-school teacher for one summer. I was wondering, why did that, but I bring this up because you bring up Mr. Rogers, right? And it's like, I had actually kind of shunned that, during that, I actually got fired from that job, believe it or not, because I didn't appreciate things even back then. So things began to become clear about my purpose for the children, to remind them of just how important that they are. I feel that there is extensive healing that is happening in my life as the result of me sharing these messages for children, not just through sharing the messages of children's books, through what I do at Empowered Publicity as a publicist. That's part of it, but it goes deeper than that. I've had people that have come to me that say, you have a cool niche. You work with children's authors as well as inspirational and spiritual authors. And this work means so much to me on a soul level, because if there are different sorts of books that can get out there that talk about the importance of, nurturing yourself and loving yourself and being kind to other people, not just the C-spot run, not just the cat in the hat, even though those are tried and true and there's nothing wrong with that. To complement that sort of energy with what Mr. Rogers was sharing with us in the process, that you can really live in a world where anything is possible as well. And it's why they call it the neighborhood of make-believe. It's been said that as part of keeping a balanced life, that play is important. And as adults, right, let's be honest, we got to pick up the kids, we got to cook the meals, we got to take care of the taxes, and then we might find just a little bit of time for us, right? I'll only be happy if everyone else is happy. I can only give myself the hour at the gym once everything is all said and done, right?
What you didn't realize is that you just touched on something that's near and dear to my heart, because I worked with Dr. Stuart Brown, a world-renowned psychologist. It's actually the head now of the National Institute of Play. And when he was doing his research for his doctoral thesis and all that, I had the pleasure of working with him. And they went, and the one common thing that they found in all mass murderers, Charles Whitman, Gacy, just through all of these people, was that they did not play as a child. Play is so important to children. Yes. And how they play is so important to children that it really affects everything the rest of their life. So I just wanted to sneak that in there.
I appreciate you sharing that as well. And thus, it is the importance of us to be able to still do that as grown children, as adults, because children pick up on whatever it is that we do and whatever it is that we say. So again, people may say, well, why does Jonathan, who is a grown 38-year-old man, have a Mr. Rogers trolley? Why does, Jonathan spend time I'm just realizing I'm referring to myself in the third person, which is not meant to be egotistical in any way, shape, or form. Why do I spend time watching Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood? Why do I spend a lot of my free time reading children's books? And it's because I feel that as the result of making the decision, this was several years ago, to reconnect back with my inner child, which is one of the cores about loving yourself. When you can get to say that I love you, I appreciate you, and everything that you went through, and that I am there for you, no matter what you are going through. You tell your inner child, who's the part of you that can sometimes be scared. If you're faced with something that could look like a challenge or a difficulty or that proverbial divine storm, when that span of things in my life was happening over, 2 years, I could have easily looked at that as a divine storm. Totally could have done that. But it's important for us to be able to do this for the children, while also there's a term that I use now, and it's called custodians. We are custodians for children, even if we don't necessarily have our own children. We are holding the space for children so that they don't have to be afraid, right? And even if they are afraid, they know that things are going to be okay. Mr. Rogers was actually called back into the WQED studios after 9/11 to actually do a series of little short videos, like 30-second spots, to talk about the importance of, when there were different things that he talked about. But one of them that struck a chord is that when there's times of fear, always look for the heroes. Always look for the helpers, I should say. He said, always look for the helpers, right? So Mr. Rogers was not afraid to cover controversial topics such as death, such as divorce, even when Robert Kennedy got assassinated. And the first week of shows of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, they went there, they talked about assassination. So I feel that, Mr. Rogers, to kind of come full circle to your question, I feel he's helped me to reconnect with my feminine side, but to also honor my masculine side. Because I think for me, it was like this struggle where it was like there was a lot of dominant masculine energy, and then it kind of went to the feminine perspective. And now it's embracing both. And I will mention this, some people think that like Mr. Rogers was like a Navy SEAL or he had tattoos. There's all these myths about Mr. Rogers. And no, he was just this very gentle, compassionate. I also encourage, if any of your listeners can get to Latrobe, Pennsylvania, the birthplace of Mr. Rogers. I actually went to the Fred Rogers Center, which is in Latrobe, Pennsylvania, where he was born. And they have everything there. They have the trolley. They have the puppets. Did you know that every single time that a child wrote to him, he wrote back? So they have boxes of stuff at the Fred Rogers Center. So again, despite what you're going through in your life, if you have, a very busy job and a few kids and, you can't watch all of these episodes of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood or do some of the things that I've done, do what actually resonates with you. Allow your heart to open yourself up to things, especially that you enjoyed as a child, whether it be playing records, whether it be watching Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, whether it be, going to Disneyland for the first time in 30 years, whatever that case might be. But Mr. Rogers is really giving us a message now that's even maybe more valuable than ever before. And it is, I like you just the way that you are special. And I like to add in that you're whole, you're healthy, and you're complete. Because sometimes, again, when we have challenges about loving ourselves, we can feel broken, or we can feel like it's something that's yonder off in the distance. And that's not the case. You can begin to do that right now.
I think the world needs that message more now than it ever has. I really do, because of just the way the world, the political upheaval, everything that's going on right now. And it gets disjointed for children to see some of the hatred that's coming out politically. I wasn't going to get political, but, there's a lot of hatred coming from both sides of this political spectrum right now that is so hateful. And your children see this. Your children see this and they learn it. And that, to me, is what's really sad about some of this divisiveness that's coming on. And I'm not saying that it's not genuine or all that, but it just needs to be kept in check, I think, when you're around children.
We live in a society where, yes, things are different now than when you were a child. Things are different now from when I was a child back in the mid to late 80s and early 90s, as I was born in 81, children have, and as parents, there's this storyline and belief that sometimes we can send our children to school and they might not come home. Like, we didn't have that before, right? It was just a matter of, you go to school, you come home, right? Despite that, it's important to not allow yourself to get sucked into the fear, because Marianne Williamson said very beautifully that a miracle is a shift from fear to love. That really is the definition of a miracle. And if we can choose to engage in more of these sorts of energies of love, be it that highest spectrum, that highest vibration. Yes, can we be there all the time? No, we're human. We can kind of slide down a little bit, right? But it's a matter of having more awareness. It's a matter of being more open, despite what it is that you experienced beforehand. Just one of the things I wanted to briefly add in is that, when we're loving ourselves, it's very easy to want to close our heart if something happens, right? Especially if we're in a relationship with someone and maybe it doesn't go the way that we had expected. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, we have issues with rejection. I remember interviewing Jack Canfield several years ago, and he said, Jonathan, rejection is a myth. It simply means redirection. Mm-hmm. So to also kind of go back to the points in your life where you were wondering why something happened, to kind of complement that perspective of looking at everything in your life with gratitude. Always look at that. Always look from the perspective that you are being redirected, right? Sometimes people will say, yell out the term plot twist, right? Especially if there's something, different than what you planned happen. This is why for the Children's Hospice, if God has something else planned for me out in San Diego, that's great. If it's meant to be someplace else besides San, I'm open to that too. I feel pretty clear in terms of the guidance that I've received, but I don't know the first thing about, to run a non-for-profit. I don't know anything along the lines of that. I'm in the process actually of, and this is the first time that I'm actually sharing this publicly. I'm actually going to give you a little bit of a scoop here on your program. I'm in the process of writing my first children's book.
Oh, great.
So I have actually been doing research on mine and things and reading 10 books in what is quote unquote my genre, because this is actually going to bring the Children's Hospice to life through the form of a children's book. So I've actually done the research, kind of moved through the fear. I've done the research thus far, which includes reading 10 books in my genre. So there's this one called Till We Meet Again, a children's book about death and grieving. There's another one called When Daddies Go to Heaven by Irma Hamilton. And there's another one that says, Where Are You? A child's book about loss. So there's 7 other ones in addition to this. And I trust the fact that that's all going to happen. I feel that you can suspend disbelief and just trust, whether you're religious or spiritual, or you're from Texas, so I will coin a phrase you'll probably laugh at. If you worship at the altar of Dak Prescott, sometimes people will worship at the altar of the Dallas Cowboys, right? Nothing wrong with that, I guess. But there is someone that is behind the scenes that's kind of moving the pieces. One of my favorite movies growing up, I should say that I really resonate with, maybe not favorites, was the movie Gone in 60 Seconds with Nicolas Cage. And there's a scene in the film where the police are looking for the list of cars that Nicolas Cage and his posse are trying to boost. So there's a specific kind of light that you can use where you can kind of see things, that you can't see. You can kind of see behind the scenes or whatnot. So I kind of use this analogy that if we could turn the lights off and kind of see what is happening in the back, whether you believe in God, whether you believe in Jesus Christ, whether you believe in angels, whether you believe that your departed loved ones are helping you from the other side or not. There is something that is moving things in the process. If you can just surrender to that and trust the fact, you mentioned several times, while we were in the Shower Epiphanies green room, which by the way, for anyone who wants to join Art in the Future, the green room has such delicious vegetables. It has such amazing things. Sometimes there's one of the jokes that I use, I think was in the movie either Wayne's World or Wayne's World 2. And they said, if all he didn't have is brown M&Ms, he wasn't going to go on stage that night, right? So the Shower Epiphanies green room has got all of the amenities and then some, by the way. I kind of lost track there for a second. But just to trust in the fact that things always work themselves out. Because the worst case scenario, if you take the time to love yourself just the way that you are for 30 days, and if for whatever reason, let's say you're not happy with the results, you just spent 30 days opening up your heart. You just spent 30 days helping to open up miracles and the lives of your loved ones and those that you care about, right? But I really don't feel that we need a reason anymore. We don't need a reason to love ourselves. And it's important that I mention this too. It no longer has to be seen as guilt. It no longer has to be, I'm loving myself, so what will other people say about me because I'm spending time on myself, right? Because the old paradigm of self-love was selfishness. And self-love is not selfishness. Self-love is you care about your time, you care about your energy, you care about your boundaries, you care about your mission, you care about serving others so that when you can be with someone, that you are fully present. So before our interview, I spend time doing Qigong, doing a lit workout, praying, and doing a sea salt bath. And I feel as the result of that, that this energy and this conversation, this wonderful experience that we're having is that much more of a higher vibration and really it feels like my heart is opening up even further. Not to say if I took out the sea salt bath or took out the Qigong, that it wouldn't have worked out that way. But this is something that is a gift. This is something that's a gift for all of us right now. You know, sometimes people think that we just receive gifts twice a year, for our birthday and for Christmas. And this is a gift that you can give to yourself every day. And it's very interesting. As we're starting to wind down our time, I'm sure. When I was in San Diego, there's a hotel that I stayed at. Purposely, the closest hotel to La Jolla Cove, right? It's called the Grand Colonial Hotel.
I know it.
You're familiar with it. It's a hotel. It's been over 100 years, but they just remodeled it. It looks really nice. And it's interesting because I have a pen in my hand. It's a Grand Colonial Hotel pen. And I realized that as a result of loving myself and continuing to do the right things and to continue to not give up, I'm closer than I think. Literally, La Jolla is in the palm of my hand. Now, it might just look like a pen, but going back to what Wayne taught us through Wishes Fulfilled, like I have anchored this vision into reality about this children's hospice. If I may share just a brief thing about the children's hospice, it's not, sometimes people think a children's hospice is where children go to die, right? I was introduced 10 years ago to the folks at Children's Hospital in Buffalo, now the Oshai Children's Hospital here in Buffalo. Each children's hospital has what's known as a child life department. They provide emotional support and entertainment for children that are going through cancer, that are recovering from surgeries, and that are also going through dialysis. So they bring in athletes, professional wrestlers, musicians, theater performers, authors, to all connect with the kids and their families, to help them move through what it is that they're going through, and to kind of take them away from what it is that they're going through at the same point in time, right? So when I was introduced to the folks at Children's Hospital 10 years ago, I started by bringing the professional wrestlers, the guys from Impact Wrestling, the guys from Ring of Honor, the guys from the WWE, right? And the big gold belts, and put them on the kids' shoulders. And it was an incredible experience. That relationship has continued to the point where I actually read once a month to the kids in the child life department at Oshai Children's Hospital. The children's hospice will have that same element. The child life element, where you can bring in people into the children's hospice. You can bring in athletes and professional wrestlers and authors and just spend time with the kids. So again, like the energy, the intention, the heart is out. And I know that God is bringing in the right people to help me to fulfill this mission, because I know that I can't do it by myself. I know that there are people that are very well equipped in certain other areas that will help to make this happen. But step one, getting out to San Diego. Step two, life partner coming in the equation. This is in no particular order, by the way, going back to the whole God's plan versus my plan. Step three, children's book coming to fruition. Step four, son coming in. And I think shortly after those 4 steps that things will become even clearer for the children's hospice. But this work that I've been blessed to do with Empowered Publicity, Art, there's a reason why I call it PR from the heart. I hope that your listeners understand and have a greater feeling of what lies in my heart about the opportunity really to be at service to other people now. I feel that when we share our stories, this is where healing happens. This is where healing happens. Whether you can share your story in an interview such as this and the Shower Epiphanies podcast, whether you are doing a large speaking engagement at a very large Unity church, whether you're doing a book signing in front of a couple hundred people at a Barnes and Noble, this is where healing happens. And it is the importance of sharing our stories. People ask me, why do you do what you do at Empowered Publicity? That's one of the responses that I say. I love helping people to share their stories. So when you can love yourself, when you can not look at your story in the way in which you did before, you can also love other people more. The service that you're able to provide is that much more genuine. It's that much more heartfelt. So it does have an impact. How you feel about yourself, how you treat yourself, impacts how you treat other people, how things reflect in your professional realm in terms of your work. I'm very blessed, and this work will continue to grow and to develop over time. And however this whole journey unfolds between Empowered Publicity, the children's book, the children's hospice, I'm just grateful. And this is a perfect way to kind of bring things full circle is that, and we talked about gratitude at the beginning of our conversation, right? I feel there's been a lot of healing happening, not just in this conversation for me and you, myself and you and I. I feel that there's a lot of healing that's happening in the hearts and the minds and the souls of your listeners who are listening to this program as well. Because at the end of the day, there's a reason why the children's hospice is being called walking each other home. It's one of Ram Dass's famous quotes. At the end of the day, it's what we're all doing, right? We're all going, back up to the big hybrid of Trader Joe's and Toys R Us in the sky, right? Right? Where, oh gosh, what's my favorite thing from Trader Joe's? Organic Power to the Greens. They sell this, it's like $3 a bag. It's got like spinach, chard, kale. It's this great thing. I have a bag every day. So the Organic Power to the Greens are served fresh every day. And yes, where you can get, unlimited Mr. Rogers trolleys at the Toys R Us in the sky as well. But we are all just walking each other home. So we really have that choice. Do we feel that heaven is that place in the sky? Or are we ready to have what we are experiencing here on earth be that heaven on earth? It's not just a Belinda Carlisle song from the 80s, ooh, do, 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 do. Ooh, heaven is a place on earth. It's a little, I was in my vocal ensemble a little over 20 years ago in my senior year of high school. So that was the best freestyle that I'm going to be doing. But I am very grateful for the opportunity to share this, because this isn't just my message. I just ask my grandmother, I ask God every day, show me what to do. Show me whom to serve, how to serve, when to serve, where to serve, and in what capacity to serve, and I'm there. And that's how I'm choosing not just to show up for this interview and this conversation with you, but, for the rest of my time for 2020 and beyond, because it's game time. This is a very important time frame for all of us right now, and it really begins with just the fundamentals of things.
I agree.
Just the way you are.
Yep. I don't think we could have planned a better way to end this show than on those words. I mean, you talk about exposing your heart to people. I think you've done a tremendous job. I think your mission is absolutely beautiful. And there isn't a question in my mind that it isn't going to come to fruition, because you believe, you have hope, you have all those things that a lot of people in this world are lacking right now. And by expressing it the way you do and have, I'm hoping that we can open up the eyes of many, many people. And I think we have. I think we served our audience well today, Jonathan, and it's been a blessing to have you here.
The last words come from Mr. Rogers and from Daniel Striped Tiger. Again, to provide the visuals, I have this amazing poster. It's actually a piece of artwork, as I call it, that the folks at Michael's actually custom framed for me, by the way. And it's a picture of Mr. Rogers and Daniel Striped Tiger, and there is King Friday's castle that they're near as well. And it says, there's no person in the world like you, and I like you just the way that you are. And if there's any sort of homework, quote unquote, or message to take from this program, you really have a choice. All of the listeners who are tuning in have a choice. You can believe what Mr. Rogers is telling you and just allow yourself to be with that, to remember how special, how loved that you are, just you being you. You can continue what was the old narrative that is very disempowering and it no longer works. The choice is yours. But I like your listeners just the way that you are, the way that they are, and Art, I like you just the way that you are too. You're a very special soul. You're doing amazing work with this program, amazing work in being of service to other people. I feel that this is a wonderful experience that is and will continue to do many wonderful things for many people all around the world, all throughout 2020 and beyond.
Thank you, Jonathan. And everybody, everything that we've talked about, all the references will be in the show notes. All the ways that you can get a hold of Jonathan will be in the show notes. Everything that we need talked about here will be there. And of course, you know that you can always find me at expectationtherapy.com. And with that being said, I'm going to let Heather White take us out of here. Thank you, audience, for listening in. And this is going to be one of the best shows that I've ever done. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the show. Drop us your comments and questions with what you want answered on the show. You can subscribe on iTunes and Binge Network. You can also get more information on the website, expectationtherapy.com.